What up, everyone? It's your boy K to Don.
And I am Natica.
This is the Love First podcast. Yes, Natica is here with us. She forgot for a split second.
I'm present, I swear.
She's present. And we have a very special, we're back. Of course, we have international journalist and also conservative, Mr. Steve, back in the building. We also have
with Elvis.
Yeah, with Elvis. You got the Elvis shirt under the Red Wave shirt. There we go. All right. Elvis supporting the Red Wave.
Not expecting that.
We also got Jenny in the building, a lawyer and liberal. We're going to talk midterm elections. It's going down. Let's talk about your shirt real quick. The Red Wave is coming. That's what it says, Steve. Yeah. So do you believe that, and why?
Well, I do believe it because I think 2 years of the Democrats running things in Washington and demented Joe Biden, right, has destroyed the country and many states and many cities.
I don't know about destroyed the country, but go off.
Well, near destruction, right? And a lot of the cities show it. You have crime, you have inflation. Are you better off now than 2 years ago? Yes, I do think he caused it. I do think he caused it. He put too much money in the economy, and that led to inflation. Plus, with the gas prices, he killed our energy independence. He just stopped the fossil fuel industry to appease the woke people and the Green New Deal people. So he killed our energy independence. He put a ton of money into the system where economists, including Obama economists, said that's going to cause inflation. And all he does is claim, it's Putin's fault. And he ignored the fact that the inflation was rising before Putin invaded Ukraine, which I firmly believe would not have happened if President Trump was still there. So he's destroyed Europe with a war, with Russia going into Ukraine, and he destroyed the economy.
Well, The whole world is experiencing inflation. It's not just the United States. Like, honestly, there's worse, like higher levels of inflation happening in the UK and Turkey and other parts of the world. So, like, everyone is experiencing inflation. And, like, unfortunately, Joe Biden inherited this from Donald Trump. So we're kind of like picking up where he left off.
He inherited $2 gas from Donald Trump, right? And it's $6 more or less now.
Donald Trump basically left the country as if, he had to, go into a porta potty and didn't clean up after himself.
John Mulaney does this whole bit about Trump in the White House. It's like a horse in a hospital. That's what it is.
Okay, so when things are bad, it's Trump's fault, even though Biden has seen the destruction, right? But then when things are good, he wants to take the credit for it, and there isn't much.
Yeah,
good.
But things were bad when Trump
Not
was
the
in office.
economy. I mean, it was the pandemic that we were recovering from. That's right. COVID happened, but Biden made things worse, and more people died from COVID under Biden when you already had these vaccines, which I'm not a fan of anyway. And then he was pushing vaccines on people. Huh?
You're not vaccinated?
I'm not vaccinated. I have natural immunity, which Fauci, who should also be in jail, who destroyed the whole concept in jail. But one, I think, I don't want to go off tangent here, right? But I think Fauci was behind what led to COVID in the Wuhan lab. But besides that, Fauci kept changing his mind about what works, wear a mask, don't wear a mask.
Okay.
No, and then the fact that he ignored natural immunity. If you have COVID, you have the protection. And he ignored that.
Except
and he
there
was
are
pushing
waves of COVID.
But he was pushing the vaccine on people, and they lied. Remember, Biden was saying it's the pandemic of the unvaccinated. Remember that?
I do.
And then you had the CDC saying you cannot get COVID if you're vaccinated. You can't transmit it to people. Meanwhile, all these people who got the vaccine and got boosted, they keep getting COVID. All right? So, but anyway, that's another
Let's
point.
take it piece by piece.
Where do we start?
Yeah.
Do we start with price gouging? Is that where we start?
Right.
Because I do think that like blaming all of like price increases on Biden like is just naive. Like I think corporations have made the most profits like ever. Like Amazon is making so much money right now throughout the pandemic, and prices are going up and companies have choices and they're not making correct choices. So I just wanted to say that. I don't even know where to go because there was a lot.
No, I'm sorry. Biden put too much money in the economy, and that caused inflation. He was paying people not to go to work. When there's too much money in the system, and just keep printing money, and right, you destroy the economy. That's on Biden, and the gas prices are due to him killing our energy independence. And Natalie, right, or Natica.
Natica.
Natica? Right. I like that. Natica. Other countries don't have the fuel and the energy capabilities that the U.S. has.
No, they don't.
And so if the U.S. was able to produce the energy it was allowed to under Trump, we could have produce energy and sold it to them. And then Putin wouldn't have had the power over Europe that he has. And President Trump, and he was mocked and laughed by the Germans when he told the Germans who have a pipeline with Russia, you're going to be dependent on Russia, right? And it's a bad thing. He didn't approve the pipeline between Germany and Russia. And they laughed at Trump. They called Trump a traitor and a Russian dupe and a Putin lover and a traitor and spy. Yeah. Meanwhile, it was Biden who immediately allowed the pipeline between Russia and Germany. And then when the war in Ukraine started, right, Putin was getting money from the Germans.
Okay, I mean, I just want to jump in here and say, like, I'm not someone who's like 100% like Joe Biden is my savior. Like, I'm not. Like, I'm to the left of Joe Biden. Like, let's be very clear. Yeah. But I think...
You can be more left than Biden?
Oh, my God. Welcome to Have You Been on the Internet?
I mean, Biden left America. He went so far left. So where were you?
I mean, I think that, like, at the same time, to, like, pretend that everything was so amazing under Donald Trump is doing, like, an incredible rewriting of history of, like, what the Trump administration was like. First, he inherited Obama's economy. Yep. And then he fucked it up. And then there was a pandemic, which he completely mishandled.
Oh, so who handled it well? I'm just curious.
Honestly, I actually think the CDC did not have their act together. I think that it was very confusing.
He did everything that he was advised to do.
And didn't listen to anyone because he's just like...
No, I mean, you mean Biden or you mean Trump?
No, Trump. Like when it came to the pandemic.
That's not true. He knew. There's like receipts that he knew that COVID was coming and he kept it like under wraps.
Excuse me. The first thing he did was he wanted to ban flights from China. Right? And then Fauci said, oh, I don't think we should do that. And then Biden called him a xenophobe for doing it. And then meanwhile, people say now in retrospect that was probably the right thing to do.
Listen, I don't know. I haven't
well, I'm telling you,
history.
Right? That's what.
So I don't necessarily disagree that it wasn't handled well. Like it's an evolving pandemic, and I think the messaging was confusing. I mean, first you should wear masks, then you shouldn't, then you should again. So like I understand.
So apologize for criticizing Trump because that's what you did. You blamed him, and now
I literally will never apologize.
Right, well, that's the problem. I thought this is a love show.
No, so look, as someone
tough love. It's tough love.
It's tough love.
As someone that's truly in the middle, right? Every election, I'm just like, yo, y'all really gotta impress me because I be feeling like they're all working for the same corporations.
I understand.
So my personal view, right? As far as the pandemic, right? I think that's a hard one for anybody to handle because that's like a once in a lifetime occurrence, hopefully once in a lifetime occurrence, right? So what I will say, a strength and a negative, right? I will say one of the strengths is the fact that that Trump put in good initiatives to get this vaccine done in record-breaking time. And not to say I'm for or against the vaccine.
Operation Warp Speed.
Yeah, just the fact that it got done. So I give him credit for that.
It could have gotten done sooner, but he just, he almost messed up the whole deal.
I mean, but it's pretty fast for any vaccine that I've heard of,
Well, part of it was because Moderna and actually specifically Moderna, like the technology that they used to make the vaccine happen was 10 years in the making.
Yeah, it's already.
It was intended for cancer patients, and then they were able to put this to use for COVID, and then we all know what happened.
But you threw out a comment. Then how did Trump make it slower than he could have? I don't understand that.
Like he delayed the rollout of the vaccines because he had the option to give for Moderna or Pfizer for the U.S. to have access like first than anyone. And I mean, like they kind of ended up having that anyway, but like we could have gotten them sooner. Like lives could have been saved sooner.
I don't know. They waited till after the election to say, hey, we got a vaccine that's 90% working, right? Efficacy was the word that they used. So that wasn't on Trump. I think the industry kept it back because they didn't want to help Trump before the election with positive news. Now, I have an interesting take. I don't think the vaccines have been really great. They're not really vaccines.
What?
Because real vaccines prevent you from catching the disease. And plus, they haven't been checked over enough time to know really how safe they are.
Well,
so President Trump, let me just say, he's proud of the vaccines, but I guarantee you that if Trump was president, all the people who were pushing the vaccines would say, I don't trust it. And there's proof of that because Kamala Harris herself said, I don't trust any vaccine that is from President Trump.
So actually, to that point, like I think what you're picking up is like a huge problem that we have in American society is that we don't have consensus on science and we don't have consensus on these really like important issues that should be outside of politics.
Right. And you're right. And the problem is we made Fauci the Pope and the God, and we figure whatever he said is law. The big tech, right, silenced any debate, even from doctors who disagreed with him. And it really was a disgrace what happened during the pandemic in terms of trust and medical conversation and communication.
From what I remember, when vaccines were first available, I remember getting vaccinated and having a conversation with my mom and my sister about what happens next. And they were like, so now that you got the vaccine, what's going to happen? I'm like, well, I'm going to still keep wearing my mask. I'm going to still stay safe. And because I don't remember hearing that like you weren't not gonna get COVID. Like the idea was that like you weren't gonna die.
Yeah. It's mitigation of symptoms as well.
And like historically speaking, vaccines that have existed for polio, for measles, for smallpox, like that prevented death, and it also took a long time to develop, and it was revolutionary. We're like still, and I hate saying this, we're still in unprecedented times.
Yeah, that's real.
Where like a lot of things are unpredictable. I mean, like you said, we've had a lot of confusing messages from the CDC. So it's just like I remember thinking, I was gonna get the vaccine, and if I die, I die. If I live, I live. Like I was kind of at a point in my life, and I'm sure a lot of people can relate to this, where it's just like you didn't know what was gonna happen tomorrow.
And you know what the problem is that they lied to us and they acted like they knew. If they said we don't really know for sure, but we think this, instead they said no. If you take the vaccine, you're protected. We don't know if it's transmissible or not. But then they changed the tune and literally said, if you get the vaccine, you're safe. And they also then claimed that you can't transmit it to others, but that only people who are not vaccinated, they're the spreaders.
Well, that was a
lie.
Well, I don't necessarily think that's true. There was a time where folks who did not have the vaccine, where the virus was going around a ton.
Yeah, and like I think about...
But we don't know who actually caused it. Right? In some cases, people who had the vaccine they were the spreaders because their immunity maybe got a bit messed up.
Everyone is affected differently by it. I mean, like my mom and dad, when they got COVID, my mom, she got really sick. And I mean, she was able to get the Paxlovid medicine, and then she recovered really quickly. My dad was like almost asymptomatic, but he had like no voice. And even though like COVID really messed them up, but they're alive, and I'm really happy that they're around. It's a risk, but you know, a lot of us had to do what we had to do. And like the people who decided to not get vaccinated, like I don't have anything against them. But it's definitely a risk, you know?
Yeah.
But you know, the Pfizer CEO recently testified in Europe when asked point blank if they did studies on whether or not getting the Pfizer vaccine meant you were transmitting the disease or it stopped you from transmitting it. He said, we never did any tests about that. So all the politicians and maybe even the drug companies were making claims that they never even tested.
So can I ask you, oh, sorry, I didn't want to cut you off. So like, can I ask you a question? Because it seems like...
No, sorry, go ahead.
So it seems like there's a lot of points that you're making. I think from some of what you're saying, like I hear you, you know, like I agree with you, but you still are not vaccinated. I know that you said you had COVID, but... 3
times, I think, or twice or 3 times. And I survived, and I feel I have natural immunity that is stronger than the vaccine. And I had a doctor tell me, take the vaccine because your immunity will be stronger with that than if you have it. And that turned out to be not true. So they were just pushing
Well, how are you going to know? You never got the vaccine.
Huh?
How are you going to know? You never got the vaccine.
No, but I took one of those antibody tests which shows the number. But then other studies came out which then showed people who had the natural immunity without the vaccine, that their immunity seems to be stronger and last longer. And that's not me just saying it out of thin air. This is what the studies showed. So why did my doctor and many other doctors and the politicians say otherwise when they really didn't know?
Well, but at the same time, like if the vaccine mitigates symptoms, just because you had COVID and didn't end up in the hospital doesn't mean that a different person who didn't have the vaccine who then got COVID wouldn't have ended up in the hospital and dead. Like, if that person gets a vaccine, even if there is a lot of misinformation or confusing information, even if that person gets the vaccine and it makes them a little bit less sick, like that's worth it, right?
Okay, but a lot of people also who didn't need to take it, younger people who have strong immunity, they ended up getting heart damage. And some people died as well. So I think just this push to get it and just lie that if you get it, you're not going to...
So, see, as a person in the middle, what I kind of see is I'm grateful for the vaccines because it allowed the more vulnerable people to be able to come out and live their life, be more free. But also what scared me was the mandatory rules where it kind of felt like your rights were taken. If you're not doing this, it got to a point where you can't even perform. You can't enter a venue, you can't enter a bar, you can't eat here.
Humans are unpredictable.
You know,
and you were branded. You were branded, right?
Yeah,
like a scarlet letter.
Oh, so I guess I would say if I was voting in the midterm, my question for the conservative, my question for the liberal side, right? So let's start with conservative, right? My concern with the conservative side would be they're not really. It doesn't seem like the conservative side is trying to bring more unity, right? What I want to see is more unity from the country. Instead of, this side did that side did that. And also putting the people over corporations. And what I'm not happy about from the liberal side is seeing all of these new mandates where it does feel like my freedom is being taken away. From the speech to even with the vaccine mandates. Right. So how do you speak to someone in that side?
Well, I agree with you from the liberals. They're pushing vaccines. They want to shut people up. Here in New York, you had the governor, Hochul, who I hope loses to Zeldin, right? She said, Republicans, you don't belong here, right? If you're a Trump Republican or whatever, go move to Florida. So that's her unity right there. I think Republicans will bring unity because they're going to deal with what is frightening to people, the crime issue, when people don't feel safe, right? You don't trust anybody. Again, so if they deal with the crime issue, that's going to be one thing. If they get rid of the mandates, then people won't look at each other as, oh, you're vaccinated, you're not vaccinated, you're lesser than. I think that does bring more harmony. And then when they allow free speech and they don't focus on censorship like the liberals, if everyone could speak, that's a good thing. And I think that also brings an equality to the messaging.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And then, so as far as the liberal side, again, so some of the concerns might be the cancel culture, the censorship, as far as what you're allowed to say, because it feels like anything's kind of getting labeled misinformation just to kind of shut down a side from talking, right?
Yes.
So that's a side that we're seeing. And also the daily effects in our economy. Like what I feel is like Biden did inherit a lot of this stuff. You know, it's from a pandemic, a once in a lifetime situation, right? But yet again, it does affect our daily. Like when we go to the gas pump, more than the average president, like we can kind of feel that. When we're going to the store to buy stuff, we can kind of feel that. So what are they going to do as far as making sure we feel like we still have our freedoms as a country? And then what can they bring to the table as far as getting the economy back in shape? What makes the Democrats what puts them in position to put us in a better position than our Republican candidates?
Sure. So I think in terms of, you know, I don't know what we ended up calling it, the American Rescue and Recovery Act or something.
Yeah.
The Inflation Reduction.
It's
a lie. What a lie that is.
So I think, so a lot of things got passed in that bill that don't take effect for a long time. So for example, like when it comes to drug prices and things like that, I think unfortunately, like because those don't kick in until later, the immediate effects are not like seen in the American people. So it's sort of like, oh, we passed this huge, amazing package and like saved the economy. And then it's like, but you don't feel anything in your day to day. So I do think that is really frustrating.
Yeah.
I think gas prices are really frustrating. And inflation is really frustrating.
Yeah.
But what I don't...
Biden did that.
I really like ignoring like the role of private actors in the economy is like not. I don't think that's. I think you have to see what companies are doing and what corporate profits are in order to actually address like what's going on with the economy. And I think, you know, a lot of economists disagree about what's going on. So, anyways. What I don't think that the answer is to put in a bunch of Republicans who want to take away health care and want to gut Social Security and want to do things like that. I don't think that's really the answer. I also, in terms of cancel culture, listen, I think it's hard. I think it's been co-opted a little bit or demonized as like, oh, you get canceled, you can't say anything. I do think that we need to do a better job, like as a society, of rehabilitation and conversations, having tough conversations.
Yeah.
I'm trying to hit everything that you said. As to crime, you know, crime is up everywhere, but I don't think that the answer is necessarily more police. I think we have to have a national reckoning about the criminal justice system and policing.
You know, it's up mostly in Democrat-run cities. That's where it's mostly up.
I mean, listen, I didn't like look at the numbers. I can't like say that. I do know that like it's been a long pandemic, and it's really easy to fall back on that and say like, look at all those cities.
But it's the no cash bail. It's letting criminals out right away.
I actually like completely disagree with that. I think that's not.
Okay, but Democrats made that.
Yeah, and I think having people be able to bail out and not have to sit in jail is a good thing. I don't think it's causing an increase in crime. I think over the long term we'll see studies and it'll show that.
Well, it has to be because you're letting the criminals back out there committing a lot of the same crimes.
But like, if we're talking, I mean, are we going to talk about like types of crimes, like petty crimes versus violent crimes? Like, I don't know. Like, I've been to Rikers Island. Like, I don't think anyone should be sitting in there. So like, we can have a conversation about criminal justice if you want to.
In the 90s, Giuliani made New York the safest city the safest big city in America, if not the world, by dealing with the small petty crimes, because it was found out that those committing the small crimes were also doing the big crimes as well. Okay, so
like, what about white collar crime?
Like, we have to like.
Oh, that's a whole other conversation.
Like, the amount of people who were incarcerated in the 90s was never bigger. All of those people, most of those people were black and brown. What Giuliani did was throw black kids in jail. Like, let's have that conversation if you want to. But like, then we need to have a whole other like conversation about how we like deal with just like systemic inequality. Because what's petty crime? Stealing food. What's petty crime? Dealing marijuana, which, like, by the way, it's legal now and a bunch of white folks are making a lot of money. So,
how about jumping the turnstiles of the subway?
I mean, to me, it's too expensive. It's $275. Like, that's crazy to have to spend $275 both ways. Like, the bus and the train should be free.
Well, it's expensive now when you're risking your life, right? Because of all the crime there, right? But I just have to make a point. Trump lowered drug prices, and that's why Big Pharma didn't like him, right? Because he was putting pressure on them to lower prices. So whatever Biden is doing and wanting to take credit for, it was Trump who lowered drug prices.
No, there's a whole other package that was passed in the Inflation Reduction Act.
That's a good sign.
But can I ask you a question, though? Because I'm kind of interested, like, you talked about how essentially the idea of like you can't say anything anymore. So my question is, though, is like, why is that a Democrat thing? So
basically, what I think turned it into the Democrat thing is it got politicized with Trump, right? Especially around January 6th when the president got banned from Twitter and things of that nature. And even to the point, like, if I reported on it, my video got banned just for saying the word Trump. And to me, that was scary. No matter what the actions are, that there could be repercussions for the actions, but taking that all aside, no matter what side you're on, it was just scary to me that the president of the United States that everybody voted for can't even get on social media and talk to them.
Well, first of all, he lost the popular vote, so like, let's just say that.
Well, I'm you know, but we go by the Electoral College.
Yeah, I know.
I wish we could give it him.
So
you know, I wish we could. But
no, you don't. You want the Electoral College.
I don't want the Electoral College.
Of course, you're saying that.
I want the votes of the people.
No, but then you want California and the left-wing kooks over there to always determine. Sorry.
Well, they got more people. I get. They say the Electoral College is there because certain states won't have a voice.
Don't matter.
Certain states won't have a. But if 90% of the people live in this state, then they should have a way bigger voice than.
But they do in the House of Representatives. So the more population you have more representatives in Congress. But I think the Electoral College was an ingenious way to give states a voice in the leadership.
And then what I don't like it because there's no law. Like, the Electoral College can vote differently from what the people say. Yeah. They haven't done it, but they literally can. If they decide, no, we don't want that. Like, it's.
Didn't they do that in the 2000 election between
George Bush
and Al Gore? Like,
no, he just lost the popular vote. No, they recounted it, flipped it. It was just one side had a lot of control over the recounting, so that's why it was looked at as funny.
Right. In Florida, the Supreme Court finally said you got to stop the counting because they would. If you remember the pictures from that time, right? They were examining the Chads, right? If it was pushed.
Well, I don't remember that, but I have read that.
We were too young for that.
The point is, it was inconsistent judgment, and in a way that wasn't fair.
Simpler times.
So, and just going back to your point, right? So I think that's what it kind of got looked at like that. Now, me personally, I actually, and I know he probably don't like them, but I actually listened to Trevor Noah a lot, Stephen Colbert, some other people. And I look at them as like free thinkers, you know, and things like that. And then during that pandemic time, and when they were saying this is misinformation, this and that, I kind of seen like where everybody was like super aligned with. It was no free thinking. It was just like, if you think this way, you're dumb. Like and I'm still trying to figure things out as things are evolving. But I'm almost hearing from the people that I respected, you know, that were on that side, like, you're stupid if you think this way. It's like we can't even have the conversation.
Yeah, that's how you polarize people.
And look, Twitter was forced by the government, and that's illegal for the government to tell a business to cut free speech.
Who forced the Twitter to?
No, I'm talking about Alex Berenson, who used to be like the New York Times #1 health guy. So when he was raising questions about the vaccine and these studies that brought to light that some people really had a lot of issues by taking the vaccine, the government, Biden, was pushing Twitter to get him off of Twitter. And he sued Twitter, and he ended up winning. And a lot of these documents came out about what the government was doing to force Twitter to get him off. So the Biden administration is corrupt. They're pushing companies to censor us. And that's something that I appreciate that you recognize. They were silencing not just free thinkers regarding COVID, but just conservatives. A conservative can say the same curse words out on Twitter than a liberal could, and I know, right? And the conservative would be banned or suspended, right? And the liberal just kept getting away with saying things. That's why they're so angry now with Elon Musk there. He's going to allow a more fair exchange of ideas.
Honestly, all I've been getting is just like these random bots following me on Twitter since he began his takeover. So I don't know how it's better.
I think as a
time.
media, and like obviously we're doing a podcast right now, but media is obsessed with Twitter, and Twitter's like not that important, and most Americans are not on Twitter. Yes, all journalists are on Twitter, but I think that is interesting because like I heard what you were saying, but like there is a dividing line between government speech and commercial speech and private platforms. So it's just interesting that like we're having this conversation about Twitter when like it doesn't have that many people on it.
But
so I just wanted to talk about that.
But it's powerful, and that's
that's
the fact, right?
I mean, I guess like.
And like you said, they silenced President Trump.
Yeah, so it's almost like with Twitter and Facebook, like they do take a lot of meetings like in Congress, you know, and in Congress are presenting what we want to see from your platform. Like they ask them questions and then they're basically setting the tone. Like I would say now the government is probably more involved in big tech than it's ever been before.
Well, I think big tech needs to be broken up and regulated. Would you probably disagree? Of course he does.
I think they should be regulated, but I don't like
regulated in a good way that they need to be fair. They can't be forced to be an arm of the government in terms of, because right now you're finding out that the government had sort of a hotline with Facebook, right? About if they wanted to flag someone or who they should silence, and
but what?
Yeah, the government cannot use...
I don't know, no, but what are you talking about? That the government had like a hotline into Facebook?
If they had an issue with something being posted on Facebook, they can communicate directly with the company and bring it to their attention and essentially tell them what they should do. And Facebook was under threat of being broken up, right? And so it's in their interest to do the government's bidding, and that really is against the law. The government has to abide by free speech. Private businesses don't. But if the government is putting pressure on private industry, or public industry for that matter, to silence speech, that's against the law, and that's what the Biden administration was doing.
I mean, I don't know. I don't have like receipts on that, but I do think that in terms of like the tenor of the conversation on these platforms, like, are we going to talk about like Russian interference in the election and
Yes,
their
let's
interference
talk
into
about
Facebook?
that. They called Trump a spy, a traitor, and Hillary started the whole Russian collusion hoax. Okay? Right? So,
but her emails.
Okay? Right?
Emails.
She pushed the lie, and no one is paid the price for it, right? And Obama and Biden, the FBI, right? They weaponized our Department of Intelligence and Department of Justice.
I actually don't know what you're talking about. Like, I actually truly do not know. Like
you know,
break
Trump.
it down for
Okay,
me.
Trump was accused of
colluding with Russia. Yes,
of
I
being
remember
a
that.
Russian spy. He didn't win the election. Putin helped him win. Right? He was called.
Russian bots did infiltrate Twitter and Facebook. There was a whole documentary on Netflix about like that company. Oh, what was it called? Does anyone remember?
Cambridge Analytica.
Cambridge Analytica. Like there was a whole thing about how about like
right here.
yeah, it's amazing.
Well, since you like technology, go see the movie 2000 Mules. Okay, because that also shows
I'm nervous.
how that shows how Democrats were using the mail-in ballots to harvest ballots and we're shoving them in
Wait, so, you know what? I actually, that's a good transition to my next question, right?
Steve, what are you talking about?
You see what you watch too much MSNBC and CNN. That's the problem. You don't know what you don't know.
See, but look, this is an interesting question because I do hear that a lot, especially from the Republican side. So, if we feel like the Democrats have cheated the election, how can the Republicans come back into power?
They need to do a better job of watching. And so I think a judge ruled that in Arizona, people can watch these drop boxes and make sure that shenanigans are not taking place. Republicans have to be stronger and not allow themselves to be thrown out of the areas where the votes are being counted, which is what happened in the last election. Republicans need to be tougher and have a more watchful eye.
So what do I do now, right? Because I'm at the moment where I'm going to say that Steve is spreading misinformation. But I'm not allowed to say misinformation based on what you said. So what do I do when I hear what he's saying and I think that every single thing that he's saying is literally a lie?
Yeah.
How do I talk to him?
So even with that, so even with and that's a great discussion. That's why this exists. It's because what I want to know
what's the lie though?
No, but look,
and then we could just
but that leads to the next thing, right? So what is the proof behind it, right? And then that's all we can do is ask is like, what is the proof? Like, and even for your side, right? Let's say that there's someone that just wants to cause chaos, right? How do we hold the person accountable if someone does come out and says there's cheating going on in the election? What is our expectations of proof, right? So anyone could just be like, hey, they're cheating and just cause chaos if they don't like the results. So how can we hold them accountable? What is the proof that we're looking for to hold them accountable so when someone says this election is stolen, we can believe it and anyone just can't say it?
I think the first thing is to say, let's have a discussion. Because to just shut it down and make it a crime to even question the election, right? The big term now is, election denier. Well, the biggest election deniers over time have been the Democrats. We don't want to talk about that. Hillary Clinton didn't accept the election, right? He was legitimate. John Lewis, who we love for what he went through and his civil rights stuff, I think he tarnished his legacy by calling Trump an illegitimate president at the end. So Stacey Abrams, she didn't want to accept that she lost the governor's race.
That was a whole other
in
mishmash
2018.
with Brian Kemp. Like that was.
No, but the point is, a lot of Democrats question election results, and that's okay. That's free speech. But when the Republicans or Trump supporters say we're domestic terrorists and we're deniers, okay? Hochul's a crime denier. I mean, if you want to.
Well, I mean, and to be fair, I think a lot of liberals do look at it, especially that way, because the Supreme Court is looked at as a majority conservative, right? And the Supreme Court wouldn't even take this, after Trump placed a couple people in there. So I think in the liberal mindset, it's like, hey, if the super conservative,
I think that said, historically, judges do not like to get involved in elections, even if there are problems there. I think Alito was willing to put something on the side, and he's the most conservative, I would say, of the Supreme Court justices. I think in Pennsylvania, there were a lot of rule changes that were illegal in this election. The state legislatures are supposed to decide the election rules. Instead, you had the Supreme Court, the Pennsylvania Supreme Court, make decisions and have the last word, but that is unconstitutional.
Well, that's also another conversation. Like, if you want to talk about that, we can talk about that. Like, at the end of the day, that's actually open to legal interpretation. This idea that, like, the legislature should have the power is an idea, like a theory that Rehnquist really pushed in the 90s, and in the Bush v. Gore opinion, in his, like, I can't remember, I think in his concurrence, he, like, said this theory about how, like, the legislatures are the ones who should be able to decide, and then that was sort of passed down since him. So that's something has been pushed over the last, like, 30 years. But I want to go back to, like, this idea of, like, ballot harvesting, like who said that, and, like, where was that, and, like, what is that? Because what I have heard is that these are ideas that have been come up with on the deep dark web, for example, on 8chan and on 4chan, and then they're picked up by right-wing conservative media, and then it's blasted into Fox News, and then all of a sudden it's reality. So that's where I think all of this is from, but, like, what do you think?
Well, ballot harvesting is illegal.
Yeah, I know.
Okay, and look, it's very difficult to prove certain things. The problem is you didn't have cameras everywhere where you needed them to be, and a lot of places where there were, suddenly they destroyed some of the tape. But the fact is, just use some common sense. They say Biden got 81 million votes, the most in history. You think they were all legit? Do you think more black people voted for Biden than Obama? Because right now, I think they say 12 million more people voted, black people voted for Biden than Obama. I think that just doesn't...
But a lot of people were voting against Trump, though, not really for Biden.
Yeah.
People were voting against Trump.
Right.
Myself included.
And look what you got. Okay? Look what you got.
I didn't die.
I didn't die.
Yeah, but then you will take the destruction of the country. I mean, I have something I didn't want to, like, I brought it just in case.
Oh my God, what is this?
Right? Especially we were talking about the Jewish stuff with Kanye West. This is like a Jewish soul, but it's really a scarf.
Oh my God, it's a tallis.
I don't know what that is.
Save America.
Save America. Man.
But yeah.
All right, so what?
No.
Yeah. No.
But, like, if you're... What I don't understand, though, about, like, let's just call it, like, so you're a Republican. What do you think about the Republican Party? Like, do you think, like, are you, like, how do you define yourself?
I'm a conservative, America First, pro-Trump Republican.
Okay.
Right? But Republicans can be rhinos, which are
Republican in name
Republican
only.
in name only. Right? But you know what? Labels don't really matter. You have Democrats who are not voting Democrat this time. So it really doesn't matter
Okay, I was just wondering.
about the label.
So my question is like, if the concern is the validity of elections, why then has it been the Republican project for decades to install judges going all the way up to the Supreme Court to gut the Voting Rights Act? That would be my question.
Do you know anyone who can vote if they want to vote?
What do you mean?
Whoever wants to vote, can they not vote?
So what's cool about the Voting Rights Act is that it's about more than just wanting to vote. It's about tackling systemic issues that are barriers for people to vote. So, for example, there are certain practices that election officials can put into place that make it easier or harder to vote. And so one of the things that the Roberts Court got rid of was this idea of pre-clearance of southern states and other states who had in the past practices that systematically disadvantaged Black folks from voting. And the Supreme Court gutted the provisions stating that those states had to pre-clear with the Department of Justice their practices. And as soon as that decision hit, all of the states put back into place inherently discriminatory election laws that make it harder for people to vote. Right. So that's what I'm talking about.
Okay. Do you believe in voter ID?
No.
Oh, why not?
Because I don't think it should be that hard to vote. I think the government already has my social security number. They already
but it shouldn't be so easy to cheat. And it shouldn't be so hard to have an ID.
I just don't think that, like, we need more. First of all, I don't think there is cheating going on. Like, this idea that there's cheating.
Listen.
Like, where did you get that idea?
Listen, if you listen to the past videos of Jerry Nadler, even Jimmy Carter, they were on commissions about elections. And they say out loud that mass mail-in ballots allows too much opportunity for fraud. And what happened in 2020 were all these mass mail-in ballots, and fraud must have been involved because even Democrats said when you have a situation like this, too much in terms of fraud can take place.
But there's like little verifications that you can do. I mean, I volunteered as a poll worker, and like, they literally have iPads that they pull up like your signature when you register to vote. Like, there's really easy ways to verify, and like all of the
but with
stuff,
the mail-in ballots, I think
you just scan it into the computer.
I think I think it was Pennsylvania, and I'm not sure. They didn't verify a lot of the signatures with the ballot. So in a perfect world, everything is done right, but they were not all done right. And if so many people hated Trump and voted against him, there was an incentive to make him lose, even if it was a legitimately run, fair election, he would have won. And it was not fair. And you could just look at what Zuckerberg did with Facebook, where he put $400 million directly to have Democrat election offices get out the vote specifically in Democrat areas. That is not fair. That's a tilted, rigged election. And I would tell everyone to read the book by Molly Hemingway, the book called Rigged. And she's a serious journalist, and it shows how the election was just not fair. So I think you need voter ID. People need trust in the system. Because even though now Democrats are calling Republicans election deniers, I have a list here of many pages of Democrats who denied elections. And so what's going to happen if Republicans win? Do you think the Democrats are going to say, oh, it was all fair and we lost? Then they're going to question it. Like I said, Hillary questioned it, John Lewis questioned it.
But it's never been so pushed. Like, I don't really think this is like a both sides thing. Like, I don't really remember, I mean, listen, I'm younger, but I don't really remember like any time where like Democrats were really going around. Listen, we accepted when like George Bush was elected president. Like, we accepted when Donald Trump was
not all
president.
Democrats did.
Well,
but in Congress they contested it. Right, so now we're living in a different world.
But if they're contesting it in, I mean, I don't know, but if they're like bringing it to, for example, a court of law and saying, help, and then the Supreme Court rejects all this stuff. I mean, Giuliani's like, whatever. But like I'm just saying, like, at what point, like, it just seems like who's going to be the arbiter then is my question. It's like if you don't trust the courts, if you don't trust the votes, if you don't, it's like then who is it? You? Like, are you deciding?
No, but you have to have a better system than where people trust it, and I think ID is one way to do it. I would also get rid of all this early election stuff and mail-in ballots.
Why? Because voting early, like it's just when you think about like democracy runs when everyone has a voice, and everything that you're saying makes it harder to vote. And I don't understand why you need to make it vote.
You need to make it harder to cheat. In France, and I don't love France. Sorry, I like French fries. Okay, right.
I'm not French, so I don't have a dog in this fight.
I do like macarons. Macron, I'm not so. No, but they vote in one day. They go to a booth. There's no mail-in. But the problem is mail-in ballots create fraud. It's just subject to too much fraud. They don't clear the rolls. They just send.
How about countries that send out voter cards and they just send them to your house?
The biggest thing with these two, and then this is what kind of disappoints me, like with both sides, right?
Yeah.
When it comes to like voting and gun laws. Like, I feel like I could agree with any side if y'all felt the same way about both things. But my thing is, like, you have one side that's like, it should be really difficult to vote as possible, but then to get a gun should be super easy. Then another side is like, it should be super hard to get a gun, but voters should be super easy. Like, I feel like these are both like even type topics. So whatever rules we want for voting should be there for guns. What we want there for guns should be there for voting. They're both our amendments, right? You know what I mean? They're both our rights to have and rights to do. And it does look like people are trying to take away our rights when it becomes harder, because if data shows, hey, if you ask for 3 more IDs, even though you have this information, this group of people will show up less. You know what I'm saying? The gun laws, there's a lot of people dying from guns, you know? So my thing is like, why isn't there that same energy with both, like voting and guns? Like, do you feel like it should be harder to vote than have a gun?
No, I agree with you. I think it should be it shouldn't be overly burdensome for either, but it shouldn't be so simple as well to say, oh, they're too stupid to get an ID card when you need an ID to live, to vote. That tells me you're more open to the chance of cheating, right? To not check if someone is a citizen or not. Oh, you can't do that. Well, if you're not a citizen, you can't vote legally. So have a system in place where it's trusted on both sides, because it's really, our country's going to fall apart if we don't trust our elections. And it wasn't fair what the Democrats have done to Trump, saying he was illegitimate. I have to repeat it, because he wasn't allowed to be president fairly without pressure all the time.
Well, that's what happens when you're president. You get
but
pressure.
He was pressure's fine. He handled it better than anyone in the world.
You want to talk about smeared? Like, you want to talk about how much Obama was smeared?
It was nothing compared to Trump.
Right. Like birther conspiracies, please.
Yeah, they say he wasn't
American.
So what? He could have proved it just like that. End of story. With Trump, he's a spy of Russia, of Putin, and he's illegitimate.
And didn't Obama work for China, though?
Huh?
Didn't Obama work for China?
Not that I know.
Each president works for somebody.
Right.
Oh, my God.
All right.
I mean, I think it's really, when you said voting and guns, I died a little inside, because I don't equate the two. I think, well, first of all, I have shot a gun, so we can have that conversation. But
You're an insurrectionist.
No, I mean.
Well, actually, I take that back. There were no guns in the Capitol by Trump supporters, and they're labeled insurrectionists. So I don't want to confuse things. I'm sorry.
Yeah, that's another. No, but keep going.
You shot a gun.
So I do think that I think the problem here is like there are already systems in place to verify when people vote.
Yeah.
And what happened, in my opinion, is there's a lot of conspiracies about how that system is rigged, not working, fake, whatever. I don't really like when you go to vote, like if you're registered to vote, like there's a bureaucratic system that works and it counts your ballot. Like it's not hard. It's like the DMV. And so it's like, I don't really know why we have to put more layers of bureaucracy when like the system is working and actually should be easier. I don't think you should have to like take a training course and get a permit in order to vote. I do think you need to do that to have a gun. But like, so I just think it's hard because it's like we're not even having the same realm of conversation.
See, and the reason why I do equate those is because I get it, you know, in your heart it could be different. But what I just noticed, like from both sides, is when it comes to voting, when it comes to guns, right? Each side looks at it as like the government is trying to take away my God-given right when it comes to that. So that's why I'm just trying to bring that common ground. Well, like you feel like your rights being taken over here, but then there's people that feel like you're trying to take their rights over here. You know what I mean? Because down south especially, they love some guns.
They
like
love their guns.
They got more guns than votes.
They got more guns than votes, yep.
And Biden got more votes than people. So.
I mean, I don't know what to do with this because, like, Steve is just saying stuff that I don't. Like, that's not true.
You got some links to look up as.
I'm not watching that.
Listen, more Republicans won the House in 2020, and yet Trump somehow didn't. Right? There's a term. He won so many counties that historically, if you win these counties, they predict the election victor. And Trump won like 18 or 19 of 20 bellwether counties, and he lost. And there are reports of ballots that were just not right and not verified.
So I want to go back to my question then. It's like if all of those have played out in the courts and nothing has come to fruition. So what now? Like that's how our system works. Like that's how our government works. It's like the courts are the place where this is teased out. And
just
the
because the courts,
there's nothing. There's nothing
look,
legally.
That's why Trump is not in the White House. It doesn't mean that their decision was the right one. They just didn't want to get involved when it came to elections, really. The only election they really got involved sort of in our lifetime was in 2000 when they stopped the recount in Florida. But this was such a mess, this election, with so many different state rule changes. I think they just didn't know how to deal with it. And frankly, they were cowards.
I mean, I put way
they
more
were
faith
cowards.
in our court system.
Okay,
than that,
so
I'm also a lawyer.
But what I will say, so like I said, I'm always in the middle. Like me personally, during the time of Trump, you know, like going to the gas pump, paying for food, I didn't have necessarily issues. So I'm not necessarily against Trump. But the one thing that does limit me from wanting to see him in office again was after the election stuff happened, when he didn't want to step down, right? It reminds me of like a story I heard in the Bible, right? And it was about both of these two mothers claiming this kid, right? And the king couldn't find out who the kid is. So he's like, you know what?
King
I don't
Solomon?
know. Yeah, he's like, I don't know who the mom is. So you know what?
Let's just cut the baby in half,
and y'all get half each.
Halfsies.
The real mom
or have a tug of war.
Exactly.
Right?
The real mom was like, no, let her take the baby. You know what I mean? Just so it's good. Like we're not gonna kill the baby. And that's how they knew who the real mother was. So my disappointment, especially, you know, with Trump saying America first, and I don't have a problem with America first. I feel like we're involved in a lot of things we shouldn't be.
It's better than America last. Right?
But the biggest thing that did disappoint me is when the judicial system wasn't taking it, and they're saying this is going to be the action, this is the next president. He didn't stand by him in unity, and that could potentially destroy the country right there.
Agree.
You know, that could have been a civil war. And that's what kind of disappointed me.
Well,
Are we willing to risk a civil war over, you know, and taking the January 6th aside?
Okay, sorry.
But taking that aside, right? It's to me, it's like, if you care, like if I'm in a position of power and if I feel like it's not right, I'm going to at least step down so this country is together and then we could try to fight a different way.
Well, look, that's what Nixon, people say, did in 1960 when he felt that the Kennedys and the Democrats stole the election in Illinois, and that would have turned the election to to Nixon had the Democrats not won. And he didn't want to divide the country. Didn't keep the press from hating his guts anyway.
So
Trump,
we're loving Nixon.
no,
now?
but
Okay.
right? No, but okay. But Trump is a fighter. He felt it was blatantly unfair, and he wasn't gonna. I mean, I hear what you're saying, but he did say march peacefully and patriotically. What happened on January 6th, I put at the feet of Pelosi
What?
and the mayor of D.C.
But like, have you seen the videos? Like, want to talk about proof? Like, have you actually watched the videos of January 6th and of like Nancy Pelosi act? Like, I've seen.
No, you're missing the point. Trump authorized 10 to 20,000 National Guard to protect the Capitol and the city, and Pelosi rejected it, and the mayor of D.C. rejected it. So in a way, they allowed or enabled something bad to happen on that day. And January 6th was terrible for Trump and Trump supporters, because in place there were going to be Republicans who were going to stand up and say why it should not be certified. And they were going to bring affidavit information regarding the election. And that never got heard.
So, but question.
And that's the
who
tragedy.
Were those people, though? Who were those people?
Which people?
The January 6th people. The people killing police officers on January 6th.
Well,
Who were those people?
No police officer was killed. You got to stop spreading fake news there.
Okay, so that's like, I know someone died. Like, I know a police officer died, and he just said it didn't happen.
The only one who died on January 6th in the Capitol was Ashley Babbitt, a female Trump supporter.
A cop died, though. A Capitol cop
I did
died.
hear that.
A Capitol cop died.
He didn't die on January 6th.
I think he died after.
No,
But
they
he was-
lied and said he was hit with a fire extinguisher, right? Sicknick, right? They said he died. He had some type of heart
Are you looking
ailment
this up right now?
Like,
or,
what
or,
do
or
they do?
stroke ailment. He died like maybe a week or so later, and there's no proof to say he died because of January 6th. He had an illness.
Okay, but did you watch
They're
the
saying
videos?
six people died. Air Force veteran was fatally shot by a Capitol police officer.
That's Ashley Babbitt.
Yeah, Kevin D. Greason died of a heart attack collapsing on sidewalk on January 6th. Rosen Boylan appeared to have been crushed in a stampede of fellow rioters. And Benjamin Phillips, the founder of pro-Trump website called Trumperoo, died of a stroke.
What website is that?
QAnon, right?
The New York Times.
So that's the New York Times.
Oh, so I don't trust the New York
And
Times.
then five
anyway.
police officers.
No, but
okay.
okay, no, but the point is, no policeman was killed by a Trump supporter.
Okay, fine.
On that day. But yeah, it is fine. But you just say it, and you shouldn't say things because that spreads stuff.
But that's what you're
not
doing.
true.
Like, you're
I'm not
just saying
spreading
so
anything
many
that's
stuff.
not
Oh my
true.
God.
So,
But, like,
all right,
the
so the
back-
only thing is it is saying Officer Brian D. Sicknick of the Capitol Police, he was attacked by the mob. He died on January 7th. So there might be a
that's the
correlation
guy.
to that one.
Well, I don't know that he died on the 7th, and he died from an ailment. And look, I'm not here to defend people who did violence on that day. I'm not violent. I wasn't violent.
Yeah.
I listened, Trump again said march peacefully and patriotically, okay? And there's still a lot we don't know about January 6th as well. And I don't want to throw out conspiracy stuff, but there are a lot of things we don't know. There was a pipe bomb that was put by the DNC. We
What?
don't know who did that.
There's no
a guy
way.
named Ray Epps who is heard encouraging people to go into the Capitol. And yet Ray Epps is a free man and not in jail. While other people who just got caught in the moment and stepped foot in the Capitol and did nothing, they're in solitary confinement
Oh my God.
now for nearly 2 years awaiting trial.
Now we
And
care about solitary
If you believe in good. If it takes time to learn something, but you shouldn't have now changed sides and say it's okay for Trump people to be in
Well, but
solitary.
I don't think it's okay. First of all, I don't believe
Okay.
it's solitary
Okay.
confinement.
Good. All right. Good.
I don't think they should be.
They should have gotten the death sentence.
No, they should have. No, like they should have been let out on bail.
No, no.
Like,
Okay. Well, I appreciate that, right? Because Kate and Don here, right? We have a two-tier system of justice, and
Sure.
that is the big problem
Between
here,
black
and
people and
something
white people.
we could conservatives and liberals, right?
See, I
Democrat,
disagree,
right?
but okay, sure.
People
Okay.
with and without money.
That's what it is.
Right.
So all right, so the big question, right, is if this red wave comes that your shirt says, right, what changes for America and how? Then your question is going to be, what can the Democrats do if they maintain and the Democrats are still in charge? What can they bring to the table? Hold on, before we get to that one, I'm curious too. Side note. So the Republicans are blocking Joe Biden's executive order, right, for the financial student loans, right? I'm just curious, what is your opinion on that? Because do you feel that could be helpful to America? Do you think it's more of a political game? Like they don't want him to get something before the election?
Of course, it's a political thing. He's trying to buy votes. It's a terrible thing, and it should be stopped. It's totally unfair. One, it's going to lead to more inflation, putting more money in the system. But why should people who played by the rules and paid their loans back, why are they going to get money back? Are they the suckers then? And yet people, a lot of them who are middle class and even well off, who took a loan, then they get that wiped off. And then the hardworking citizen who maybe didn't go to college or decided not to take a loan, they're going to pay these people's loans back. I think it's a disgrace.
Can I say something?
Yeah.
Okay. As
It's your
someone, as someone who went to school on a full scholarship, graduated debt free, I'm a product of the New York City public school system, and I didn't, like I said, I graduated debt free. I'm not mad that people can potentially have their debts forgiven. And I also think about how we have literally, banks have been bailed out for far more money than the collective student debt. Actually, maybe look that up, but no one is saying anything about how is the government going to pay for that? How did the government pay for that bailout? And they're still going to keep messing up and doing what they're doing and just spending money like that. And, maybe I'm just rambling right now, but it's going to help people in the long run because right now, and I'm speaking as my generation, as a millennial, we can't, a lot of us can't buy homes. A lot of us can't reach the markers of adulthood that we're expected to reach because those barriers are preventing us from doing so. And
it's going to be harder now thanks to inflation and everything else the Democrats are doing.
Well, a lot of the people holding the power right now are not even our generation. Yeah. Are boomers.
Right.
I'm sorry. Are you a boomer? Your generation?
I guess I am a boomer.
Or are you
a baby boomer?
That's what that is. Baby boomer. But
boomer's an insult. I'm a baby boomer. But actually, I'm a little
Boomer
post.
light.
Wait, the baby boomers ended I think it was from 45 through 64. I'm 66. Right, so I'm a little bit post baby.
So yeah, post baby boomer.
No, but can I just say?
Yeah.
The banks getting bailed out is not a good thing, but I think if they weren't, it would have caused a total collapse of our society.
Totally.
So it was something that had to be done, unfortunately. Remember that term, too big to fail? Right? So that's something that could be looked at. My issue with bailing out these students is who is doing it. I don't think the taxpayer should do it. And there was also a survey that the kids getting some of this money, like $20,000, they're going to go on vacation with it. So
good,
right?
Good for them.
No, well,
they deserve it.
But it's not fair. I think the colleges that have so much money and all these endowments, they should be forced somehow to waive it. I don't think the taxpayer should. I think the colleges should do.
I don't mind.
Okay.
There's a lot of.
There's just the way that about it.
There's a lot of.
The taxpayers shouldn't be forced to bail out others.
Colleges these days have hiked up their tuition fees. A lot of it has to do with bloated administration fees.
Yeah.
So I feel I'll give you that it shouldn't be placed entirely on the taxpayer, but also I don't know. It's a difficult situation.
But it also just has to do with the reallocation of funding. Like, I think it's like, can we look at our defense budget? You know, like.
Well, honestly, before we even look at our defense, budget, it's just the richest people in America. If they paid with the poorest people in America the same percentage in taxes.
That too.
It could all be done.
We have to reform the tax code.
Yeah, the Trump administration actually made it really easy for rich people to pay less taxes.
Yeah, that's true. And
the economy was so much better.
So Elon Musk was tripling his net worth.
But we're also so much more, like, we continue to be and will continue to be so much more unequal. Like, maybe in the short term, like, it felt good to have the $12,000 tax deduction, like the $12,000 deduction. Like, I took that, right, the standard deduction under Trump, and I did not mind taking my extra couple thousand, whatever. And like, that felt really great. And at the same time, like, it was like it was a poisonous deal because of lowering of the corporate tax rate. Like, there was another thing of like, what did they get rid of? Like the inheritance tax, which is like, so it's just like things like that.
But those are good things because
I think those are bad things.
So if you own a farm and then you don't have the money to keep the farm because of this crazy inheritance tax, then the family loses.
No. We're talking about billionaires. We're not talking about a farmer.
No, but that's who it affected as well. But look, you could not have liked or thought it was fair cutting some corporate taxes. But the economy went up, and these corporations raised the wages for people, and we had the lowest unemployment in this country under Trump for black people, women, Hispanic, and Asians. Okay, everyone was happy. So how did the Democrats deal with it? They smeared Trump, and too many bought into it.
But we're like forgetting about the pandemic that happened right just then.
Right, the pandemic, screwed everyone over. Okay?
What were we talking about?
Yeah. Why you love Trump.
LOL. Steve. Oh, Steve.
Yes, he gave you money back.
I don't, oh my God.
Trump should pay him. He's a good one. We love Steve.
What would Democrats do? Codify Roe versus Wade. That's what Democrats would do. I think there are a lot of other things, like more like support for paid parental leave. I think things like, I had one that just went boop right out of my head. But things like that I think there are some social things. They would make it law. Same-sex marriage would be law. Like these things that socially, like our country is at.
Yeah.
That
it is the law, isn't it? Didn't the Supreme Court?
Yeah, maybe not for long.
Well, it's just
given
not
the direction.
It's not in the Constitution.
It's like precedent, so it can be overturned.
Well, listen, remember Ruth Bader Ginsburg? There's a quote where she said about abortion that it was really not good law. So she herself recognized that it may not have been constitutionally.
Well, it's based on the so the analysis of Roe versus Wade. That's not what I'm talking about, and that's what she was talking about. What I'm talking about is just codifying and making it a woman's right to have an abortion, or a person who can have a child to have an abortion. That's what I'm talking about. And I think that's sure not happening if the Republicans are elected.
Okay. So now from the Republican side, what's happening? What changes are y'all bringing for the benefit of America?
Well, we're going to put a stop to all the crazy things Biden is doing economically, first off. And we're going to try to put pressure on him to open up our energy independence again, or to just defund a lot of things. We haven't talked about what Biden has done to open the border, to allow maybe 5 million illegal people to come into our country. Okay.
Girl,
he's actually enacted a lot more. He's enacted some restrictions now.
He's going back to stay in Mexico, which Trump did.
Okay, I think the entire. Okay.
But let me finish.
Right? Sorry, I'm sorry.
He's going to force.
The floor is yours.
He may force some more security at the border. They're also going to hold Fauci accountable, the FBI accountable, the Department of Justice, because they've weaponized these institutions where no one trusts them anymore, right? I bought a T-shirt. I was debating whether to wear it or not. I chose this one instead. But I had one that said defund the FBI. Okay?
Oh, that's another.
Okay?
Yeah.
So the FBI has been weaponized by this administration. And so I hope the Republicans will hold these people accountable because, again, there's a two-tier system of justice here. And I think they would bring up big tech and have documents shown how the Biden administration was putting pressure on Twitter and Facebook and others to squelch free speech. And hopefully we'll finally examine Hunter Biden's laptop from hell, right? And someone can say, who was the big guy who got 10%, which is Joe Biden? Thank you very much. So accountability will be important. I will say one thing, though, and it's a risk. If the Republicans are seen just to do that, it may hurt them in 2024. They don't want to just be obstructionists, but they need to hold Democrats and everything they've done to ruin our country accountable.
Okay.
And we need to impeach Biden. we need to impeach Mayorkas. I wouldn't mind impeaching Kamala Harris as well.
Literally for what,
Okay,
though?
which we would do you a favor because you don't want them. What?
God.
He's supposed to secure our border,
I'm
and he
exhausted.
didn't do that. So just on that alone, he should be impeached.
Okay, I think that
Mayorkas
this actually
too.
might not be the best platform to discuss like the intricacies of immigration into the United States. I'm happy to come back and talk about that at another time.
Yeah. But you know what I will say too that kind of stood out. You know, like the defund the FBI. I kind of touch on that too, like because I feel like in the Republican Party, you guys might. I feel like some of the black people in the Republican Party, right, when they hear like how the FBI is being weaponized, defund the FBI, they might have been saying that when we felt like the police was weaponized against them, and then they feel like there was no understanding, especially maybe more from the conservative side, because it's like you guys just want to get rid of police, which I don't think it's ever been about that. But I think that when they hear like the defund the police, defund the FBI, it's like that's what we're saying about that, or even bringing it back to the Jewish statements and the generalization. A lot of black people kind of go through that generalization, whether it's TV, music. Like I've been at certain music meetings where like a black female artist, they're like, yo, this song isn't sexual enough. It's not doing that. If we don't get something like that, we're not releasing the album. Like you're not dropping. So that's from the boss. So it's kind of like, if anything, all of this, what I pray and hope is that at least brings the unity that we see each other. Because just like with the Jewish remarks, a lot of black people in other cultures were standing up like, this is not right.
Yeah.
And the generalization isn't right. But hopefully it also opens the door where maybe you guys can also see, wow, this is what these people are kind of going through on an everyday basis. When we say the police, we don't mean the police are bad, but we're just saying they're not from our community and they're approaching us like they're scared of us instead of they're there to protect us,
Look, the problem is, though, that these Democrats in the cities actually did defund the police. And they hurt communities and many black communities that looked at the police for protection as well. And so it's one thing to have a slogan. It's another thing to actually do what the slogan says. And police were then targeted. I mean, you had, bad cops who paid the price. And you brought up a discussion, right, over what happened with George Floyd. But then to turn that into smearing all police who put their lives on the line every single day, I would say most police are good, right? And we could say most FBI people who work below the top tier are just doing their jobs as well. But there's the corruption at the top of the FBI and how they've weaponized this system against Republicans is just totally a disgrace, and I think it has to be broken up.
But that's what I'm saying, where I pray for the unity to come, because both sides have felt that way about different things, and I feel like that can help us actually understand each other. Because like, let's say, and this is kind of like a dramatic example, but like, let's say there's a school, right? It's 50 teachers. If two of the teachers do something inappropriate, it's not like we could be like, well, there's 48 good teachers. It's like, hey, in this position, none of this inappropriate stuff will be taking place. So we need some type of reform going on here. We need some type of like serious discussion and changes so we could all be pleased about who are these people in the position of power. Because I respect how my dad was one, you know what I mean? You're putting your life on the line, but it doesn't negate that there are negative ones and things do need to change. And I just hope like with all these issues, it's like everyone has the same issues but on different sides of the coin.
Yeah,
so I hope we just get together and we see it.
No, that's the tragedy. What happened with George Floyd, that situation was weaponized by the Democrats and liberals to just tarnish, at the time, Trump, create chaos, and just, in a way, totally hurt the country. It could have been a peace movement, with what happened with George Floyd, because no one said what happened was a good thing. And yet there were riots against whole cities, destroying cities. Police were killed.
That's
destruction.
Not true.
It is true. What's not true?
Police were killed by protesters after George Floyd's death?
Yeah,
that is not true.
A lot of police were killed as a result of the riots.
Can you show me online?
Well, I know.
Don't know.
The point is their cars were firebombed. I think maybe 26 police were killed, but I don't want to throw out a number out there. But I know some police were definitely killed during the riots. But people were killed, even if not police. There were riots. Police were spat upon. They were treated like garbage. And like you said, right, if they're two bad teachers, do you then smear all of them and spit on the other 48 teachers? Right? It could have been a moment of unity. And instead, politics came in, right? There's a saying, never let a crisis go to waste. And that was something that the Democrats took to heart.
I don't necessarily think, I don't know. I just don't really agree with, like, your take of the whole thing. Like, having gone to the protests after George Floyd's death and Breonna Taylor's death, like, it did feel actually quite uniting. And it was, like,
mostly peaceful protests, as there were buildings burning in the background.
I mean, I don't really think.
Well,
that's
not
true.
for most of the protests. Yeah,
like, I think that's actually misinformation.
Yeah, but look, I think that happened with a few. But I also believe, and we got to wrap it up. But I also do believe that the biggest thing, and this is why I like the different views, is that even if we don't agree, we'll still take the time to hopefully be like, well, why did they believe this? Let's look at the same information. Because I don't want to get to a point where it's like we don't even want to hear the information because we don't agree with it. You know what I mean?
Can I tell you something sad about it? I asked people who were marching, and I said, would you be protesting here if George Floyd was a Trump supporter? Okay? And a bunch of people said, honestly, no, because he's then not my kind of guy. So that had less to do, I think, with race. It had a lot to do with politics and a left-wing movement.
I don't think that's... I mean, literally, Black Lives Matter. Like, that's race.
Right, unless you're a Trump supporter.
I mean, I don't know. Did you clarify in that statement?
No, I asked a question. I said if George Floyd was a Trump supporter, right?
But why? Actually, I would push back and say, like, you introduced politics. You didn't listen to them. You said, let's make this about Democrats and Republicans.
No, because I think it automatically became that. It was seen as that.
Why? Like, is it because the Republican Party is, like, allergic to having conversations about racism?
No. In fact, it was President Trump who I would remind you did police reform. Okay? You forget that, right? He worked with Van Jones on CNN, and Tim Scott, Republican, black from South Carolina, he wanted to deal with, after George Floyd, more police reform as well. And the Democrats didn't let him bring his bill up because they wanted to weaponize George Floyd. This was when Donald Trump was president. So when Donald Trump was
president and the House was Republican and the Senate was Republican, but somehow the Democrats...
No, the House was Democrat at the time, right? And the Senate was Republican. The House didn't want to
Did the Senate take it up?
I think that the Senate may have, but the House blocked it. The point is they saw an issue and and they chose.
I mean, I don't want to
to weaponize. Look,
I don't want to belittle the point that I do think it's true that there is like hyper partisanship in the U.S. and I do think that like both sides are
and that is
afraid
my
of the
point.
other side,
That
like,
sadly,
scoring points.
that
Yeah.
sadly, something like George Floyd, that was universally seen as something that was bad and shouldn't have happened, could have brought us together. Yeah. But instead, I saw division and hypocrisy in the protests, and I was just curious to get an answer to my question. And I'll just say it. Too many people told me if George Floyd was a Trump supporter, that the energy behind the movement wouldn't be the same. And I have a story here, murder of black Trump supporter Burnell Trammell, right, that happened in Milwaukee in the summer of 2020. No one still knows who killed this man, and no one really knows his name. And so I think it's pretty unfair that we only know certain people's names and other names we just want to wipe out.
Well, was he shot by police though?
No.
Okay, well.
I
don't really.
He wasn't shot by.
You're making like a little bit of a false equivalency here. Like I think like you're kind of like discounting like all the political organizing and energy and like love that went into the protests after George.
There was too much destruction that happened when you look at Portland and the cities and all the chaos, and then Kamala Harris paying for a bail fund to let people who committed violence be released from jail. And that's why you have the problems you have now. There's no respect for the law. Democrats are afraid to do anything.
But it's like
that
there's no respect for the law except like you're not respecting election law. Like, do you hear
that? No, I'm not talking about election law right now. I'm talking about I'm talking about the crime.
But if you compared it to something similar, right? Because most of the protests that happened with Black Lives Matter were not violence, and I think we look at it more violent because of the certain riots that did take place. But it's almost like as if they say everyone on January 6th was an insurrectionist. You know, and then they start labeling, hey, everybody, because like you said, there were peaceful protesters out there too that were not running up in the Capitol.
Well, most didn't go
exactly, but because of the few,
they ignore it.
January 6th is all looked at because of the few, you know, and that's kind of what happens with the Black Lives Matter because of like maybe 2 or 3 riots, and they had like 1,000.
I think there were 200 riots, Kate, Don, and the police just were told to stand down and let the people vent. There was like billions.
But if there were 200 riots, do you believe there were only 400 protests? Like, do you believe there were 50% riots per protest?
I don't know the numbers. All I know is that sadly, it was not just peaceful protests to make the country better and to recognize what happened that was bad. So, it was politicized, used to divide, and was smearing all the cops, and people died, and people in low-income communities had their businesses destroyed, and the Democrats sadly let it all happen.
No, honestly, which was horrible, but at the same time, I feel like we don't have unity because like when it comes to January 6th, people are only judging by the people they seen on camera running in the Capitol. They're not judging it by everything else. And then it falls down to the people, us in the streets. Now, we have an issue because what we're told about Black Lives Matter, what we're told about January 6th. You know what I mean? When, to be fair,
and Antifa.
It's not even, I don't too much to Antifa. But I will say the Black Lives Matter protest, and then the people charged of Black Lives Matter end up being fraud. But for what it stood for, there was definitely, if we look at the numbers, more than 50% of the protests were peaceful, no issues. And then if we actually looked at the January 6th, and then we're like, wow, not even half of these people ran in the Capitol. But if we keep that narrative going, and that's why I believe the freedom of speech, but we also have to be very careful what we're putting out there because some people are not going to do the research. They're just going to take the word as law and then treat people how they want to treat people based off that, you know. So the main goal for Love First podcast is not to just have these debates, but to actually like bring the unity. Because Democrats and Republicans are both weaponizing things. They're both getting money from these corporations.
They're two sides of the same coin.
They're both spending money
No
together.
corporation gave me any money, and I would like some. Thank you very much.
That's good to know. I'm glad about that.
Love First would take the corporation money, we're not politics.
Can I have some?
I just like, the thing is though, is like what you just said actually like two sides of the same coin. Like, yes, in terms of like large political parties that like exist to gain power and not necessarily help people. Agree. However, like one side is like condoning people who are flying the Confederate flag, people who are actually Nazis, and one side isn't. So I don't think that it's a both sides thing.
I have to say that within the Democratic Party, we have
the party of the KKK.
What do you mean?
Maybe like in the 60s, but things flipped around. But like within the Democratic Party, you have like the moderate Democrats and the progressive Democrats, and like there's been a lot of infighting within the Democratic Party. So like when I'm talking about two sides of the same coin, I'm thinking about like the older Democrats who are moderate, who are more centrists, and like Joe Manchin, or like Kirsten Sinema, or like Nancy Pelosi, Joe Biden, like these people who are like, they've been in power for a really long time, and they had many opportunities to, for example, codify Roe versus Wade and didn't, know?
Yeah.
So
when I say two sides of the coin, I just mean like the voting and the gun laws, or even the vaccine and abortion, right? These people will say my body, my rights. You know what I mean? On opposite things, but when you flip it,
that's a very good point, right? It's because I've gone to events where it's sort of anti-vax in terms of mandating it, right? And then, right, we say my body, my choice with the vaccine, and then the same liberals who are pushing, right, not to have or to have the right for abortion to say, oh, my body, my choice.
I just think
but
it's
they
hard.
all for the vaccine mandates.
It's hard because you're like, okay, like where do the lines have to be drawn in order for us to have like a functioning society? And I think that's what we're like all
Vote
trying to figure out.
Republican.
Vote Democrat.
Well, like I would say, let's not. I think the first step is like just y'all coming in having this discussion, because I think we're all gonna do like different research maybe we haven't done before, but it's not to write the other one off as like I can't even hear this garbage, right? Because half of our country does think this way, so let's try to understand them.
That's true.
Because the key to uniting is one, to understand each other. We don't have to agree. We just have to understand each other and respect each other. And move forward. That's it.
And do your own research, right?
Yeah.
Don't mimic what an idiot on MSNBC may say.
I literally
right?
don't watch MSNBC.
No, okay,
Yeah,
good.
neither
Or
do
if
I.
you're
Fox,
CNN
we're
or Colbert,
Or the first, what is that one?
OAN.
OAN and Newsmax and Fox. Oh, wait, speaking of which.
Oh my God, classic.
Look here.
Oh, Jesus, okay.
Yeah, Fox News sucks. He got
Fox
set them
News
in.
sucks.
Here I
I didn't wear my
Fox
Trump
News
underwear
sucks.
today.
And here I was about to compliment Steve's ability to crack a joke, which I really appreciate. Until he broke
Sorry
the
about the
socks.
hairy legs.
No,
We love it though.
it's all good.
We definitely want to thank you guys
That's why.
Thank
I'm sorry.
you.
Go ahead.
Thank you guys for such an amazing discussion.
Do research. I would just,
Do research. Make sure y'all like and comment. If y'all got this far, y'all should be liking, commenting, sharing it. Y'all with us for the long run, you know? So, and if you don't got the Love First TV app, make sure y'all download that. And then just we'll start with Natica, and then everyone let them know where they can follow you on social media.
You can find me on Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, Facebook page at Natica Music, Natica Music. I really wish it was just Natica, but that girl who still has that handle, she has not let go of it.
Les, listen, we gonna get rid of her.
We'll sue her.
One day. It doesn't have to end this way.
We'll send Biden's FBI on her, right?
I was gonna say, send Vladimir.
She may not even be in the United States.
Just disappear.
Y'all can find me on Instagram at Mini Florals, MINIFLORALS.
Yes. And actually, we're about to connect y'all so we can sue the other Natica. Now you got a lawyer. You ready to go. Actually, we got to sue some fake Cater Dons out there too. You know what? We got some fake Cater Dons out there. It's the real Cater Don on all platforms. Steve, where can we find you?
I don't want to be found.
You don't want to be found.
Especially with
He lives
Biden's.
off the grid.
Listen, he just travels the world dope journalist, very passionate, as you can see. Write some great articles and stuff like that. So we definitely want to thank you guys for your time. We encourage everyone, use the power you have to go vote. Go out there and vote. Encourage your people to vote.
But don't vote twice.
Don't vote twice.
I will not. Or 10 times, right, with a fake ballot.
And make sure you're an American citizen.
Get that ID.
All right. We'll respect these results. All right. And remember, why hate when you can love first? It's the Love First podcast. Yeah.
Perfect.
You're so remarkable. The opposite of Fayo. You must be from heaven. Where'd you hide your halo? That's crazy, cuz you make me want to start a family like the Brady Bunch. Oh my word, you let a man treat you different? I hope he listening. Let me teach you about division then. It's time for y'all to divide. If he let another tear drop up out of that eye. When I see him in the streets, we gon' have to